This is a joint effort between the Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light and the Jewish Earth Alliance. And previously we were meeting monthly, but because of lots of reasons, we decided to meet only quarterly. And generally, we talk about topics that are relating to Pennsylvania, but sometimes we talk about topics that relate to the national scene. What's going on in the national scene is mostly people are asking to make comments to the EPA because there's not an awful lot of legislation nationally, not a lot of legislation going on probably anywhere. But we always begin with a reflection or a prayer. So I thought I would begin with the idea of fixing the world through our actions. This is an ancient Jewish tradition that's called Tikkun Olam, which means to repair the world. Jewish mystical traditions believe that before Adam ate the apple in the garden, the world was whole. Creation was one with the Creator, and peace and harmony prevailed. Then Adam rebelled against God by eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The Bible states, "Do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for on that day you eat it, you will surely die." That's Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. By eating from the tree of knowledge, Adam changed the king's laws. He abandoned the tree of life, in which everything is perfect and upon which faith depends. Adam's transgress shattered the soul of the world. All of the creatures became separated from their creator, and the humanity separated from nature. From the mystical point of view, Adam's transgression testifies to the awesome that humanity holds the capacity to spoil the creation. So humanity also has the possibility to heal and to restore it. The world becomes whole when people take seriously the divine law and the obligations to fix the world. Just as Adam partake of the tree that God promised proclaimed off limits to him, so are we in every generation invariably overstepping our bounds and participating in that which is not ours. Our actions have the power to influence the world, and this motivates me every day to act because we need to fix the world and make it better. So I've asked Monica Carey, who's with the Solar United Neighbors, to be our guru on all things Pennsylvania renewable energy tonight. And she's going to talk about an assortment of topics and things that we need to be doing. She's the program director for the Pennsylvania Solar United Neighbors, which is a national organization that really is advocating for solar. And Monica, if you would like to tell us a little bit more about Solar United Neighbors, feel free, or dive in right away to our important topic tonight with such an incredibly wonderful attendance of 30 people. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Phyllis, for inviting me. Thank you all for having me back. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun the last time that I came and presented to this group, and really excellent questions, great conversation. So I'm very excited to do it again tonight. I will tell you all that tonight's presentation is a little bit more broad. We're going to talk about a lot of Pennsylvania renewables policies that are kind of at play right now. So because of that, I'm not going to go as deep into a lot of them. So if you do have questions along the way, do not hesitate to stop me and ask. I really want to make sure that I get to everybody's questions. So I am going to go ahead and start sharing. Okay, and okay. So when Phyllis and I first kind of chatted about the idea of this presentation, it was really, I think we talked maybe a couple of weeks before Governor Shapiro was supposed to be presenting his budget address for 2024. And that's kind of the thinking behind this presentation is, what did Governor Shapiro campaign on? What has he done since then? What is he promising to do in the future? And what should we be holding him to do? So I guess I'll back up and introduce Solar United Neighbors. So I'm actually based out of Lancaster and I focus on Pennsylvania as a whole. But Solar United Neighbors, we are a national nonprofit organization. We are technically headquartered in Washington, D.C. That's where we got our start. But we are a nonprofit and we really focus on solar education and policy and consumer advocacy. We want rooftop solar to be broadly accessible across the United States and the world. And we think that people should be able to benefit from all of the advantages of solar, be they environmental or financial. And so I'm going to start by talking a little bit about Governor Shapiro's campaign and how he ran, the promises he ran on. Particularly, there was one promise that got a lot of traction and it became known as 30 by 30. But so this was the promise for Pennsylvania to use 30% renewables for its electricity generation by the year 2030. This is a very aggressive ramp up, considering Pennsylvania took, I want to say 15 years to go from 0 to 8% renewables. So now, the promise was within 7, maybe 6 years, we were going to go from 8% to 30%. So very aggressive. Still, I will tell you, a lot of environmentalists and activists don't think 30% is enough. I think there's very good argument for that. 30% is nowhere near like the amount of renewables that we need to be using to produce electricity, given the climate crisis. But 30% would be really big for Pennsylvania, considering where we are. And then the other big promise he made that I didn't outline here was that he was going to create a pathway to being carbon neutral by 2050. Now, I will tell you, between that and the specifics of 30 by 30, there really wasn't much of a plan outlined. Maybe a couple of pieces. There might be some things that he had mentioned or talked about, but by and large, there was a real lack of specificity around these goals. So I will tell you, in the last month, basically since Phyllis and I last talked about this presentation, 2 big things happened. The first is Governor Shapiro's administration came out with a 10-year economic vision of Pennsylvania. And secondly, he gave his budget address for 2024. And so you can see from the left is an article based on the outcry after the economic plan was released. And on the right is the outcry after his budget address. And really, you can see that there's one through line, and it is that there is really no discussion around climate change, around the need for renewables or clean energy, and really not much of a plan at all to that end. So I think it's important now to talk about how that 30 by 30 plan would have been implemented. So Governor Shapiro talked about it in terms of AEPS. So that is the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards Act. It was a law that got passed in 2004. That was where we set that initial ramp of going from 0% renewables to 8% renewables. And so, the 30 by 30, he wanted that to be in an AEPS framework. And that's great because that's something that's already established. We've seen that it works. So you're not like creating something whole cloth, you're not reinventing the wheel. Legislators, regulators, they already get how it works. But, I think it also speaks to the fact that in Pennsylvania, we had that 8%, and that is technically still our goal is 8%, even though, it plateaued back in 2021. But you can see the other states that are our neighbors, they have much higher goals. And that's what I mean when I was saying, 30 by 30 is is a good start. It is definitely not where we want to end Pennsylvania's renewable goals. Oops. And so this AEPS framework, like I said, it's already in existence. It's understood well. So we other advocates, we were really focusing on 30 by 30 to be within an AEPS bill. And we recommend expanding the existing AEPS Act. There's already bills in the Senate and the House that do that. And I talked about this last time, these are bills that incorporate that 30 by 30 goal, and it has a really great solar carve out as part of it. So in the original AEPS Act, the solar carve out, or the amount of electricity that had to come from solar specifically, was only 0.5%. In these two bills, it's 14%, which is incredible. That really shows that solar is necessary to achieving the renewable goals that we want Pennsylvania to reach. And of that, it is specified 4% should come from distributed generation, which would be rooftop solar. 8% would come from, utility scale solar, so those really big installations out in farms. And then 2% would come from community solar, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So this is also great because these two bills incorporate community solar right into the heart of it. It's saying Pennsylvania needs solar, and specifically needs community solar to reach 30 by 30. And there are broad benefits to AEPS expansion to a 30 by 30 structure. So if you think about it, you're taking more homes solar, more schools, churches, businesses. They're all able to save money by going solar. We're improving the environment with cleaner air and water in communities, lower carbon emissions. So again, cleaner air. We have farmers who are able to economically benefit and keep their land by leasing their farms for hosting large-scale solar installations. And you have the creation of thousands of jobs for solar development and maintenance. And AEPS historically and this year has bipartisan support. So that's really critical in Pennsylvania to getting anything done, because we are the only General Assembly in the entire country that is split. So the Senate is led by Republicans and the House is led by Democrats. So any bill that's going to be passed really does need to have bipartisan support. So I already talked about that first set of bullet points, but we and others really urged Governor Shapiro to stick to that 30 by 30 plan, and to do it via AEPS. Don't try to create something new, just do what Pennsylvania's already got, but do it better. And so House Bill 1467 does use that 30 by 30 structure. And the other benefit of it is that it only expands tier 1 energy sources. So without getting too technical, when the original AEPS was introduced, it was back in 2004. It was still Pennsylvania at the end of the day. So some of the renewable sources were clean energy, and some of them were waste coal or biomass. They were not as, they're not clean energy sources. But those are mainly, the bad ones are mainly in tier 2. And so with this structure, HB 1467 is really expanding the good pieces of AEPS, which is really critical. And the problem with Governor Shapiro's not sticking to his campaign promise is not only that, he hasn't issued any kind of support for 1467. He has not come out and told legislators that they should be supporting it, or that he wants to see it on his desk, which we know can motivate, especially a Democratic-led House. But when he talked about his vision for Pennsylvania's economic future, he primarily only discussed it in terms of fossil fuel production, and hydrogen generation. And hydrogen, lots of pros and cons, but hydrogen generation by and large is very dirty, and uses a lot of energy to create hydrogen in the first place. And mainly that's being done with natural gas, and other fossil fuels. So really not the 10-year economic vision that we or others want to see for Pennsylvania, and definitely not what he campaigned on. So at the end of most of the sections, I do have a little what you can do, for this action. So we have a lot of action alerts. These are the emails that go right to your legislators. But in general, we would also recommend that you join SUN as a member. We are here to help you have conversations with your legislators. We'll help you write a letter to the editor, help you go into your community and find others that are in support of this bill. But you can see at the bottom there is the, let me see if I can put it into the chat too, is the URL. So this is going to be, and I'm sorry, because I'm going to be typing for a second. Okay. Yep. So that is our action alert to support House Bill 1467 and Senate Bill 230. They are companion bills. They are almost identical, and they are the ones that would expand the AEPS, and specifically only tier 1 renewables. They would expand them to the 30 by 30 structure, and they would also enable community solar. And the other piece of this action alert is that it also goes to Governor Shapiro. So I do think that that's really critical right now, is to be telling him specifically, that these policies are things that we want to support. And we think that Pennsylvania deserves them. Okay, so my next section, I will tell you in advance, is not very long, just because there is not a ton of action on RGGI, unfortunately. So just some brief background, because I am sure lots of people here know about RGGI, but RGGI stands for Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It is a multi-state cap and trade program. It is a market where fossil fuel powered plants buy and or sell their carbon allowances. And so really it's there to reduce carbon emissions in a state. The nice thing about it too is that the proceeds from the market sales actually go back into the states and can be reinvested in communities. And the states themselves are the ones who decide how that money gets spent. So in some cases, the money will go towards energy efficiency programs. You could see a state spending the money on improving and weatherizing homes for low-income residents, maybe making their homes, solar ready, by improving their roof. So there are really great ways that that money can be used. But in Pennsylvania, that's never even really been a conversation. So Governor Wolf, during his tenure, basically had Pennsylvania join RGGI, did it without the legislature's approval, and that made them have feelings that were very negative, and they've basically never recovered. And so, I will tell you, I had meetings with legislators that said, and this was, in 2021, said, yeah, we know Pennsylvania's going to be part of RGGI, like it's inevitable, but I don't really want to talk about how to get the money for my community. I just want to talk about fighting it. And, that's a waste of everybody's time. It's making sure that that money is not being reinvested in our communities. It really is just kind of fighting the inevitable. But so during his campaign, I think Governor Shapiro is, I think we all know, very politically savvy. He is walking a tightrope. So he was never a big vocal supporter of Reggie. He kind of went out of his way to not really talk about it, actually. But at a critical moment, he did a very good thing. He appealed the Commonwealth Court's decision that would have removed Pennsylvania from Reggie. And he did not do this on the basis that Pennsylvania should be in Reggie. He did it on the basis that he has the executive authority to enter Pennsylvania into a multi-state agreement. So, take that for what it's worth. But as of right now, there are really two major pieces. The first is judicial. So there are two court cases before the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. The first one is that one that Governor Shapiro appealed, and that was back in, I believe, October, November of last year. But essentially it's a decision saying that Reggie constitutes a tax on the ratepayers, and only the General Assembly would have the power to levy a tax on Pennsylvania and not the governor. So that was the one that he appealed. The second one was already in front of the Supreme Court, and that was the one to determine if the governor alone has the authority to join a multi-state initiative or if he needs to get approval from the General Assembly. So both of those, the second one's actually already been heard. I believe the Supreme Court was waiting for the second one to reach it to make any decisions. So we're ultimately waiting for a judicial decision to know the outcome of Reggie. In the meantime, Senate Republicans, like I said before, Reggie really undergirds all of their decision making around environmental and energy policy in Pennsylvania. It has been incredibly contentious since Governor Wolf decided to join Reggie, more than it had been before. And so, last session, there were a lot of legislative attempts to pull Pennsylvania out of Reggie. None of them succeeded, and none had been issued this year until February 5th. So this was right before Governor Shapiro's budget address, when Senator Yaw introduced Senate Bill 1058, which would have repealed Reggie regulation. And this bill went to Yaw's committee, the Committee on Environmental Resources and Energy. And it passed out of the committee within 3 days. For anybody who follows legislative affairs in Pennsylvania, that is incredibly fast. There wasn't a hearing. It got announced on a Friday evening, and basically went through the night. So very underhanded, very cloak and dagger. And the bill has already received 2 considerations on the Senate floor. So in Pennsylvania, a bill has to have 3 days of debate before it can be voted on. So those are the days of consideration. And it has now already received 2 of those 3 days. Basically, it would just take Senate Pro Tem, the President Pro Tem, bringing the bill back onto the floor to vote it out of the Senate. It is unclear whether, I think they would have the votes to pass it out of the Senate, but it's unclear if the House would have the votes to pass it. That we would really rather not test that theory. We really want to show that there is support in Pennsylvania for Reggie. And so I don't have an action alert for this one, but what I would recommend is calling and writing your legislators, your senators, and telling them that you do not support Senate Bill 1058 and urge them not to vote in favor of Senate Bill 1058. I think that's really important. Okay, I'm going to pause here because I've been talking for a while. I'm going to get some water, but are there any questions that I can answer?
There's quite a few in the chat.
Mm,
So why don't and
yeah.
there's also some really, really good resources in the chat that people have been
Oh,
introducing.
great.
So I will scroll back up. Pat has a whole bunch of questions. She wants to know, how can we get rid of fracking?
Oh, man. Oh, Pat, that's the question. Unfortunately, Pennsylvania, well, and I will say this is part of Governor Shapiro's budget address, and his economic plan was saying that Pennsylvania is an all of the above energy state. There's a lot of pride in Pennsylvania being an energy producer and an energy exporter. We're, by some estimates, number 3 or number 4 in the country in terms of energy exporting. And the way that we get to maintain that status is by fracking. And Pennsylvania also has a lot of fossil fuel lobbyists and really strong fossil fuel industry in Pennsylvania. So I think you continue to do community organizing. I think you do a lot of advocacy and education to not only your community, but to your legislators. But no, it's an uphill battle. It will take a long time to kind of break that mentality. But a great question.
And Jason wants to know, when deciding whether to appeal to Governor Shapiro, said that there were some potential larger regional alternatives. That seems to be a lot of wishful thinking, but is there actually something that works at a RGGI type of initiative that would include other significant power producers like Ohio? Do you want me to, that was a mouthful. Do you want me to read it again?
No, I think I'm okay. And I'm happy if others have more information than I do around this. RGGI is the only multi-state initiative to reduce carbon emissions that I'm aware of. Governor Shapiro had it was called a RGGI working group last year. It was a lot of experts in the field trying to find out if RGGI is the right path forward for Pennsylvania. And really, the key criteria were to reduce carbon emissions, to make sure that ratepayers are not impacted, and to make sure that he would have the unilateral ability to make that decision. And RGGI was seen as the best choice, but still not the choice. People were still very tentative about joining RGGI, and I didn't hear any other alternatives to RGGI at the time. So I am not aware of anything, to answer your question, that we could join that's not RGGI but similar.
So Tim recommends the Better Path Coalition. It's a network of grassroots groups and individuals who advocate for a just and sustainable transition to renewable energy in Pennsylvania, and he's included the website there that you can go to. He's also recommending the Pipeline Safety Trust with a website there. And Libby then asks, how can we keep leaves, ice, snow, and bird poop off of solar panels? That's her first question. Why don't you answer that one, and then I'll give one.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, so ice, snow, leaves, they all will go away on their own. Leaves will blow away for the most part. The only problem is if they get caught underneath, and you might just need to take a broom underneath. But ice and snow, it's going to melt. It'll slide right off, because your solar panels are also going to be at an angle. So gravity will also be working on them. And the bird poop is rain will often take care of that. What you want to do is make sure you're monitoring your power production and that you're not seeing major changes or decreases in your power production from your monitoring software. And if you are seeing issues, I would call your installer and ask them to recommend somebody who can do solar panel maintenance for you, and they'll just come out and wash off your panels. And their lifespan is 20 to 25 years. Will prices go up as they need to be replaced? I think we've seen prices kind of level out. There are like minor fluctuations with inflation and other policy changes, but tax credits are as high as they're going to be. So I think mainly solar panels have kind of leveled out, and maybe you're seeing kind of minute decreases in cost. Sorry, go ahead, Phyllis.
That's right. We have a question about community solar, which we will get to after you talk about it. Antoinette says, sadly, my state senator is one of the sponsors, but I think it's even more important when it's your state sponsor, when your senator who's opposed to it, for you to make it. You're not going to make a huge difference, but let them know that you care. And Kathy talks about power interfaith community, which is Philadelphia suburbs, and Lancaster has a climate justice and as one of their campaigns, and supporting 30 by 30 is one of their stated goals. So that's definitely another organizations to be thinking about if you're in the Philly area, the suburbs, or Lancaster. And they have conferences, and several hundred people have come out in attendance. And then Ken says, keeping your panels clear and clean is not an issue. Ask anyone with solar and look at the panels in your neighborhood. Panels last more than 25 years, but they do lose efficiency yearly by a small degree. That should be focused on when one does their due diligence. Everything will cost more in 25 or 30 years, including electricity and panels. Actually, the price of panels has been coming way, way down.
That's right. But I will say that the electric rates going up is actually to your benefit, because we're going to talk about that later too. But the more electricity costs, the more your solar power is valued. So, so even though your panels are losing efficiency, your solar energy is making you more money, more savings, I guess. Yeah.
So before we go on to community solar, does anybody want to jump in just on mute and ask the questions about Reggie, about the bills, about the alternative energy portfolio standard, the good ones and the bad one? Chuck.
Are there any bills on emission fees that get into the state legislature hopper of late, or has that been put aside?
I haven't seen any. At least last year when they were being introduced, it made the news. A lot of people talked about it. So if they are being introduced, nobody's as concerned this year as they were last year. It's not getting the kind of traction that Senator Yaw's bill did get. So I don't want to say no for sure. I just haven't heard of any.
And I just heard last night that Senator Yaw is up for re-election. And a very little chance that he's not going to get elected. Any other questions about not community solar, but Reggie or the alternative energy portfolio standard, or anything else that has been talked about so far?
I see Antoinette has a question about successes in states that have adopted Reggie. So the other states that have adopted Reggie, they are able, well, you can see how much the allowances are selling for on the market. It's a quarterly market, and they do announce the prices in advance. So you can also kind of calculate, well, if Pennsylvania were in Reggie, how much money would the state be receiving? And I believe every quarter, well, we're in the billions of dollars now for how much money Pennsylvania would have been able to reinvest in communities based on the allowances from Reggie. I think the other states are seeing extremely similar, reinvestments. They're what I see is that a lot of the RGGI allowances, the proceeds from them go towards energy efficiency programs in their states. So if you think about, you know, the Whole Home Repairs Act in Pennsylvania, that was something that, you know, advocates are fighting for every dollar to be invested into that program so that low-income communities can do simple weatherization and energy efficiency repairs on their homes. Governor Shapiro, in his budget address, asked for $50 million to go towards that program. But if you think about the money from RGGI, that easily could be spent on the Whole Home Repairs Act, as well as other programs that are on the local level. So I think by and large, RGGI is extremely positive. It's only more positive when paired with things like a 30 by 30 AEPS strategy. So that's why it's really critical to continue to support Pennsylvania joining RGGI and to you know, in this case, urge your senators to say no to Senate Bill 1058.
Question
So-
about alternative energy portfolio. Some years ago, the alternative energy portfolio included waste coal as qualifying as an alternative energy.
Yep.
Is waste coal still in there?
Yeah, unfortunately, it still is. It's called Tier 2, the Tier 2 renewables. Actually, no. So that's why Pennsylvania is called the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards and not the Renewable Portfolio Standards. Waste coal is an alternate energy. But yes, it's in Tier 2, which is not one of the forms of energy that is expanded in the bills that I showed before. So we are not advocating for more waste coal to be used to power Pennsylvania. We do not think that that is a good strategy for a clean environment and a financially sound future.
Are you advocating for this version of the portfolio standard?
For the House Bill 1467, which does not expand Tier 2, which is where the waste coal is.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Does SB 1058 talk anything about Tier 2? Or is it just simply to cut out RGGI?
1058 is a simple RGGI repeal. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions before we move to community solar?
Just a quick comment. I heard that the AEPS needs more co-sponsors for it to come out of like committee and go to vote. So if you you should check online and see if your legislator is listed as a co-sponsor, and if they're not, then you should try to schedule a meeting and get that, you know, talk to them about it.
That's a really good note. And in general, more bipartisan support is always better. In this case, that means Republican co-sponsors. So if I live in Lancaster, so I have Republican House members. So I am on them constantly to get them to support AEPS. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Thank you.
Monica, I believe you have also volunteered to help people in the meetings, correct?
Oh,
If-
yeah. Oh, I am happy to
mean-
join, happy to be there as like technical support and answer the very technical questions. Happy to help you set up the meeting. Yeah, just let me know. I am there.
So having a meeting with your representatives, particularly if they have not already signed on to this, please, that's a very, very important lever that you can pull. And when you get Monica to come to your meeting, then you have the power of the understanding the issues and can answer the technical questions. So all you really have to come in and say is, I want you to do so and so, and Monica can answer the question. So it's not that hard to arrange a meeting. Please do so. And if you're meeting with their aide rather than the representative themselves or the senator themselves, that's just as good.
Yep. Thank you, Phyllis. Yeah. I will tell you, face-to-face meetings are incredibly powerful. much more than an email. So if you're willing to do it, they're pretty much all willing to do video calls and Zoom calls these days. So highly recommend that you get in touch with me, and I'll put my contact information at the end so that if that's something that you would like to do, I am happy to help you with it.
It's important to notify your representatives if they are supporters, but you don't have to meet with them as much because they're already online, but they need to know that you care. All right, why don't we move to community solar? And Pat has a question, which I'm pretty sure you're going to be addressing. How soon will community solar be available to Philadelphia residents?
Hopefully this year, Pat. So for anybody who is not familiar with community solar, this is when you have a large installation that's off-site. Typically, it's going to be in a farm or just on unused land. And then you, the homeowner, the person with the electric bill, you are going to subscribe to a portion of power production from that installation, and that's going to offset your electric bill. So it's a really great way to support local solar because a lot of times the installations are actually in your area. So supporting local solar as well as reducing your own electric bill. And that's really important because this is a time when I think the National Renewable Energy Lab estimated that nearly or more than half of homes in the United States cannot go solar. And, there are lots of different reasons for that. So if you have really old, beautiful trees, do not cut them down to go solar. That defeats the purpose. But maybe you can't afford to go solar. Maybe you are a renter or you live in a condo and you don't own your roof. If you have an old roof and you can't afford to both pay for the solar and for the roof repair and replacement. So, lots of reasons to not be able to go solar, but the benefits of solar are something that everybody should be able to access, whether or not they can go solar on their own roof. So community solar is a way to kind of equalize the benefits of solar for everybody. So community solar has long been of interest in Pennsylvania. I think this is the 4th session in a row that community solar will have been introduced. And up until now, it has not been enabled. So you can't just do community solar in Pennsylvania. It does have to be legalized. It has to be enabled before you can do that. And so what we're seeing is something really interesting and unique, I think. There have now been 4 separate bills introduced for community solar in Pennsylvania. Everybody's trying to, figure out what is the recipe that's going to get community solar passed. So here are the 4 bills that are currently in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. And in general, they go from bad at the top to good at the bottom. So House Bill 330 was written by a utility. It is really just saying that utilities are able to sell renewable energy at a premium, so making ratepayers pay more for solar, and that they get to see the benefits, the financial benefits of that. And, that's something they can already do, honestly. And it's really just there to kind of create confusion and let legislators feel like, oh, yay, I did something good for solar, and it's really terrible. So I wish I had a big red X over this one. This is bad. No. The second one I would say is also bad. So this is Senate Bill 550. This actually is community solar, whereas the last one just kind of pretended to be. This one would kind of build those installations and let people participate, but it adds a fee to every single person who subscribes to community solar, a big fee that then goes to the utility to be paid to the developer. So really you're just giving millions, hundreds of millions of dollars a year to developers to be able to build and sell community solar subscriptions. It also, you know, this bill is good for labor, which is amazing, but it does have some requirements that make it really hard for kind of small local community solar installations. So it's really benefiting big developed installations that are going to be like taking up a lot of land. But if you wanted a solar installation on like your local church or school or community organization, and they've got a roof, they're able to develop a community solar installation that their members are able to subscribe to. That is true community solar. And those requirements in Senate Bill 550 make it really hard for those small projects to actually move forward. So like I said, there's just kind of too many cons to Senate Bill 550 to warrant passing it, which is okay because actually it never really went anywhere. And so the next bill or set of bills that enable community solar are the ones that I talked about before that are part of that AEPS expansion framework. So Senate Bill 230 and House Bill 1467. And again, that's saying that community solar is required to meet Pennsylvania's renewable goals. And specifically, it's a 2% carve out. So 2% of the electricity sold in Pennsylvania has to come from community solar. Okay, and I would say in general, that one is neutral. It is a very simple enabling legislation. It's got some good things. It's missing some things. You know, it's neutral. But then House Bill 1842. So this was the one that was released most recently, and it guarantees that community solar won't cost more than regular electricity. It may not save you money, but it won't cost you more. And it's paid for with federal Inflation Reduction Act funds. It's not paid by ratepayers who are not community solar subscribers. So I think that there's some really good pieces in there. And that's the one that I think we and other advocacy organizations are the most excited about. And it actually turns out that that's perfect because 1842 already received a hearing in committee. And this is the House Consumer Protection, Technologies and Utility Committee. And the chair is Representative Matsy. And he's already announced that they'll be holding a vote on the bill. So this is honestly incredible. This is the farthest a community solar bill has gone in Pennsylvania in years. And if the bill goes out of committee, it'll go to the House floor and we'll be able to receive a vote. And I think that there is appetite among House leadership to do something good for solar. So I think we could see a floor vote even as soon as the end of March. So it's really weird being optimistic in Pennsylvania, but I am really optimistic about this bill. However, it then has a very uphill climb in the Senate. So again, Reggie keeps Republicans from really wanting to do anything good for clean energy or for environmental bills. And I think we're concerned that Senate Republicans may add amendments that would basically make this bill really terrible, more bad than good. But so again, trying to be optimistic, but also trying to pay attention to what's going on. So we at Solar United Neighbors are working to improve the bill while we're also paying attention to make sure that there are no poison pills in any future amendments. So we are continuing to push for consumer protections, we are really fighting for meaningful guaranteed savings. So that phrase, guaranteed savings, is in the bill. But again, it's just saying you're going to come up even. At worst, you're going to be even. The rate itself is going to be set by the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission later. So no way of knowing what they're going to do. But we really want to see people save money on a community solar subscription. Solar is cheaper than all other forms of energy. So, you know, people who subscribe to solar should save money. And then secondly, we're fighting really hard to make sure that there's meaningful low-income participation and savings for those residents through consumer or through community solar. But then we're also going to fight against anything that's added that would weaken net metering, which I'm going to talk about in the next section. But that would basically be something that would kill the solar industry in Pennsylvania. And so it would be really hard to agree to a community solar bill that does that. And so in general, we just don't want to trade away good solar policies for a weak community solar bill. So all of this to say, I am very optimistic, but I think, as always in Pennsylvania, you have to be clear-eyed and kind of see where the threats could be coming from. But so here is our action alert for House Bill 1842. Oh, you've got it already, Phyllis. You're great. Thank you so much. And so, yes, I highly recommend using this action alert. Let your legislators know that you support House Bill 1842 and you want them to support it. And, you know, we're expecting a committee hearing, a committee vote within the next month. So hopefully I'll be able to get an update to Phyllis for you all by then. Okay, so I am going to move on to net metering. Actually, wait, I think I saw a question.
I have a question. Yeah. Do you know how many, Antoinette asked, do you know how many reclaimed brownfields are being used as sites for community solar?
I do not, Antoinette. I know that in Ohio, that was a big part of the community solar bill that they passed, is that there's additional incentives for developing community solar on brownfields. I haven't seen that discussed as much in Pennsylvania, but it could very easily be added by amendment. It could be part of the discussion. I also know there's a lot of incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act for solar sited in energy communities, including brownfields. And so if community solar in Pennsylvania is going to be partially funded through Inflation Reduction Act funds, then there may be automatic incentive to develop those installations on brownfields.
And Erin is asking whether or not there'll be a write-up available. Yes, we will produce a write-up available for all the actions, because there are so many wonderful actions.
I know.
Thank you for asking about that, and we will commit to doing that.
And then I'm going to do a very quick cheat sheet for Howard. So 1467, I know it's so annoying, all the numbers. House Bill 1467 is both AEPS and community solar. 1842 is just the community solar.
Yep. Okay, so IPL will distribute it. If Monica wants to help us write it, that would be great. Or Renica and I can write it, but we will run it by Monica and make sure we get all the points in there. So let's go to net meter.
Yep, perfect. So the last piece, and I did kind of allude to this before, is what's called net energy metering, or just net metering. But so this is your standard home that is still connected to the grid, even though it has solar panels. So when a home goes solar, they get this bidirectional meter installed by the utility. So now energy can go from the panels to the grid or from the grid back to the home. So that's kind of at the heart of net metering. So essentially what happens is if you send excess energy from your home to the grid, your utility will credit you for all of that energy, and they'll put those credits on your monthly bill. And that is going to reduce your bill over time. You basically get to roll the credits over month to month, kind of like cell phone minutes. And so that helps you save money. So like in the summer, you're going to be banking a lot of credits because it's so sunny. But then in the winter, when you're not producing as much, you can spend down the credits. So this really helps you save money and offset your electric bill. So net metering in Pennsylvania, it is the gold standard. It is phenomenal. It is 1-to-1 retail rate. So that means for every kilowatt hour, every unit of energy that you send from your home to the grid, it has the same value as whatever your utility is selling you. They're not going to pretend that, it's different value of energy. So we are very protective of net metering. It's really the thing that makes solar make financial sense to homeowners. Without net metering or with weaker net metering, you actually have much longer payback periods, much worse return on investment. Many fewer people are able to go solar. And so part of the reason that we think that solar should be valued at that full retail rate is because it is locally produced. That energy is going to go basically from your home, probably over to your neighbor's house. So it's going to do a lot less wear and tear on the grid. It's really staying local. It's also now adding to the mix of energy sources on the grid. So you're increasing the reliability. If you have a grid that's made up of 2 energy sources and one of them goes down, you really have to now rely heavily on the other one. By adding to the mix, you don't have to worry so much if there's a power failure from one of the plants. And then in general, there are tons of environmental benefits for solar compared to fossil fuel production anyway. So, there are also the environmental benefits as well as the financial and the grid benefits of solar. And so net metering, like I said before, it is the heart of fair crediting for solar energy, but utilities hate it. They have hated it basically since it was conceived of back in Minnesota, I believe, in 1984. So, it's been decades of utilities hating net metering. It threatens their business model. They're not going to make as much money if they have to credit you for the energy that you're producing. And you've now got a power plant on your roof and they want to be the only power plant that you're buying from. And so their argument is that solar owners are wealthy and they are the ones who are getting to use the grid for free. So they're not paying their fair share, which means that the lower income non-solar owners are paying for the wealthy to have solar. And I think that this is a really bad argument, both on its face, but also really in bad faith. So in Pennsylvania, this is solar data for Pennsylvania. You can see that the number of solar adopters is actually the highest for people of lower incomes in Pennsylvania and much less for people of high incomes. It's really kind of uniquely true in Pennsylvania. And it's in part because we have such good net metering. It makes it accessible to people of lower incomes. But the other part of it is that utilities don't care. They don't care about their customers and they don't care about their lower income customers. They're really just there to maximize their profits. So what we're concerned about is utilities basically helping to write a bill that would reduce net metering, make it drastically weaker. And that bill we have heard rumblings about, we had been expecting it to be introduced early this year. I think now because community solar is moving, it's been kind of put on pause. So far, knock on wood, nothing has been introduced. But we're hearing a lot of specifics about what could be introduced, which means they have a plan. And the problem with net metering is that an attack on it could come through lots of different avenues. It could be a bill, it could be an amendment to a bill, so an amendment to a community solar bill, for example. But when the budget was being worked on and will be again in the summer, there are lots of different pieces of code that get added to the budget, and net metering could be altered in any of those. It could also come through a utility rate case at the Public Utilities Commission that's happening down in West Virginia right now. And so we kind of have to be constantly vigilant, looking out everywhere. And we do know that we've already seen in Pennsylvania, some rural electric cooperatives have weakened their net metering policy. They're not forced to adhere to the same net metering laws that the investor-owned utilities are. So they know, they can maximize their profits by weakening net metering, and they have. So I think it's really only a matter of time. So this is my final action alert for today, but this one is to let your legislator know that you support rooftop solar and net metering. We think it's really important for legislators to hear from their constituents who have solar or who support solar, because in a lot of cases, legislators, they have to cover so many policy areas. They're not experts on every single thing. They may not know that they have constituents who have solar. They may not understand net metering or how important it is to making solar accessible. So we really rely on solar supporters and solar owners to let their legislators know how critical fair retail rate net metering is to the success of solar in Pennsylvania. So I'm gonna pause here for a second.
I'm putting it in.
Okay, perfect.
You can continue talking. I'll type.
Okay. Well, I was gonna change slides, so I will just give you a second. But if anybody has any questions, my next slide is just gonna be my email address. And so if you have more questions, feel free to either come off mute or put your questions in the chat. And I know I went a little bit over my hour, but thank you all so much.
Do anybody have any questions?
Oh, Erin has a good question. So Erin's question is, why do utilities hate net metering if they're going to turn around and sell the credit to someone else at that same rate? Do they generate money from the extra energy? So if you think about it, they are getting credit, or I'm sorry, they are getting a unit of energy and they are crediting or basically giving money to the original owner. And then they're going to be able to recoup that exact amount of money from the neighbor. Not their business model. Their business model is to make profit on every unit of energy that they sell. And so they are just coming up even by offering full retail rate net metering. And so, Erin, that is great logic that you applied. Unfortunately, you're not thinking like a monopoly utility owner. Any other questions? Oh, wait, I can move on. So this is our website, solarunitedneighbors.org, and then that is my email at the bottom. It is pateam@solarunitedneighbors.org. And that goes to me, but it also goes to my policy and advocacy organizer, my community organizer, my honestly, everybody. So any question that you've got, somebody on my team can answer it. And again, if you want to meet with your legislator and advocate for any policies that I talked about today, I am happy to help you with that. Just reach out and we can talk about how to make that a reality for you. And thank you all again so much for having me. Thank you, Phyllis, for inviting me. But yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions.
This was an amazing amount of information and great questions from our wonderful and informed participants. We will be sending out the recording to everybody who signed up, and we will also be providing a summary of all the action alerts that we should be taking. And there's so much we can be doing, and Monica, you did an amazing job of really covering the landscape in so clear. This was wonderful, and I'm so glad everybody came. Thank you all, everybody, for coming, participating, asking questions. And I can tell you that when Monica says she will follow up, she will follow up. She or her organization will definitely follow up. So if you have a solar question, if you have a question about an alternative energy portfolio standard, anything like that, you want to meet with your representatives, your senators, by all means contact her. She will definitely do what she promises to do, because I've tested her.
Phyllis is tough.
So anybody have any further questions? We know it's after 8, but I always think that people who stay on, we now have 27 people still staying on. Clearly people
Wow.
are.
Yeah, and really exceptional questions and conversation.
Thank you so much. As I said at the beginning, we're not meeting monthly anymore. We're meeting quarterly. So who knows what the issue is going to be by late spring in terms of what we're going to be talking about. It'd be really great if we had some things to celebrate, that we had passed some bills, but this being Pennsylvania, we don't get things passed all that quickly. So we will always have our work cut out for us. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. Thanks for asking great questions. Thanks for your participation. And thank you especially to Monica and to Renica, who always is the tech support and always available to answer questions. So thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you all. Have a great night.